an article that had came out on NFL.com where the Baltimore Ravens were talking about how they're going to implement a running back by committee approach. Obviously, they still have Mark Ingram, but then they also drafted, I'm drawing a blank on the kid's name out of Ohio State. Dobbs, J.K. Dobbins or whatever. So they were talking about how they still want to use a running back by committee approach. And it got me thinking, I said, man, Pittsburgh, we've been hearing mixed reviews on it, right? I mean, 1 minute we're hearing that they want to, minimize James Conner's touches this year, but, go with the running back by committee approach, but still make it where James is the guy, the bell cow. And I was like, man, it's kind of contradictory when you're talking about minimizing his role a little bit, preserving his body, but making him a bell cow. But then it's running back by committee. So I just wanted to think, like, can a running back by committee approach work? Because when you look at the division, obviously in Cleveland, they're doing running back by committee with Kareem Hunt and I'm trying to blank on his name.
Nick Chubb. Yeah.
But I say, so when you look at those two, and those two are very, very successful, both individually, but now we're going to get a chance for a full season to see them work collectively together. I think that's going to be a very successful tandem. Obviously, I'm a big fan of J.K. Dobbins, and you saw the success that Mark Ingram had in Baltimore last year. And shoot, I still throw Lamar Jackson in there too, because he's just so dynamic. So you see the success that that's going to have. Obviously in Cincinnati, they are traditional one back, Joe Mixon. He is what he is. Mm-hmm. Now, when we're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers, though, when you're looking at a James Conner, we know when healthy what he can be. We know when healthy he's a Pro Bowler, he can be a bell cow back. But we also know the injury history that he's had and how he has had a lack of availability of lately. So then you look at the rest of the running backs. You talk about a Benny Snell. Obviously, we had the young kid, Anthony McFarland, was a great interview. If you haven't checked that out, I strongly encourage you to do that as well. But 4th round pick of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you still have Jalen Samuels as well. So when I think of the running back by committee approach, initially you put it like this. Initially, you don't want to run it back by committee approach because that's saying that you don't have a main guy, a feature guy. Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately how the running back by committee approach started. I mean, you remember back in the day when it was your Terrell Davis's, your Emmitt Smiths, even Adrian Peterson, like they weren't coming off the field because you knew they could do everything and they were always going to be there. But now the running back by committee approach started when you started losing those guys. And you didn't have a guy who can, hit the edge and take it to the house, who could block, who could catch. You didn't have all these, you didn't have one person that could do 3 or 4 things. So you started to say, okay, well, now I got to draft 2-3 guys back here or put 3 different guys to fill these different roles. And that's how the running back by committee approach started. But teams have been very successful with both styles. But ultimately in Pittsburgh, I think understanding how Coach Tomlin works, because I saw it firsthand with Le'Veon Bell and LeGarrette Blount, where the approach was running back by committee between those two. But once Le'Veon got hot and he proved that he could be durable, he proved that he could sustain it, it became, we're not running back by committee. Le'Veon's our guy. I think in this situation with James Conner, it can be very similar. If James goes out there and he proves early on that he can be the guy, I don't think the running back by committee approach happens. I think that they ride him till the wheels fall off. But the problem is, if those wheels do fall off, well, now you're in an issue because McFarland and Benny Snell by themselves, I don't know how successful that's going to be just because they haven't proven it yet
exactly.
over a sustained body of work. Whereas we've seen James Conner be successful. We've seen what he can do. So that's my whole, I guess, conundrum, or that's the issue that I have with this whole situation is, all right, do you ride James in that sense and hope that the wheels don't fall off? Or do you just say, let's preserve him for the longer haul of the season and go run it back by committee approach?
Well, if that's the case, I prefer the first approach. I don't think you can play on your fears like that. Mm-hmm. You're just going to have to assume he's going to be healthy, because if you're playing this game of, man, how many carries? He could get hurt on any given play, no matter what.
True.
You know what I mean? So I think if he's the guy, you roll with him. Now, going to your point of health, now he has been unhealthy, and this is kind of what we've been talking about with either trading for Fournette,
right,
or bringing in like Dobbins or drafting a running back in the 2nd round. Now, I think that is all good and well when you are considering health, but how the offseason has played out, it looks like we got Conner, we got Snell, we got McFarland, we got Samuels. So if you look at that running back room, I think Conner's head and shoulders above all those guys.
I agree.
So the main concern was health with all the talks we were having with bringing in running backs or not. So we haven't really addressed it like we thought we were.
Right.
This is what we got now. So considering all this, I think Connor's the guy like that. I think he's going to have to be too.
Well, so this is my question to you, though. So we saw two situations that played out very similar. Todd Gurley.
Yes.
Okay, so Todd Gurley.
I was going to say that. I don't want a Todd Gurley situation with the Rams last year.
But you look at both years. You look at the year before that where he went crazy and then he essentially fell apart right when they needed him the most. Then you look at last year where he actually was able to play the whole season, was still able to be successful the whole season. Now, granted, they had him on a pitch count and the team just wasn't as successful.
But we've talked about that before where they should have kept Gurley in more.
They should have screwed the team. But this was the thing, though. They did that the year prior to that, and you saw which screwed the team more. That first year. Super Bowl, though. Yeah, but he was a joke throughout the whole playoffs. If Todd Gurley throughout the playoffs was like how he was the first 10 games, they win the Super Bowl. But because his body had fell apart, there was nothing that they could do.
I was going to say, though, they didn't play him in the playoffs like that.
Because he was hurt.
But Anderson played really well, which my point is like
Anderson playing well versus if Gurley is healthy playing well is night and day. And Gurley, when he missed that, I think it was the last 2-3 games of the season, which is why they picked up CJ Anderson. He was never healthy from that point on. Even when he came back in that playoff game where I think it was when they played Dallas, I want to say, where CJ went crazy and then Gurley still had 100 yards, he still didn't even look right then. So that was the biggest reason. They just kept trying to cover it up like, oh, yeah, he's healthy. He's good. It's like, no, he's not. We can tell. We're watching him. He doesn't look the same.
Can we pinpoint that it was the playing time, though? That's the hard thing.
He said it was.
Gurley said it was.
Yeah, Gurley said it and McVay said it. They said because of what they say, he has a symptomatic something with the ACL tear that he had. Mm-hmm. So from then, anytime he's playing a lot of times, it's the wear and tear on it.
Is that different than anything Connor has been going on?
In theory, yes, because Connor doesn't have one particular thing, but Connor has shown that he has a lot of bumps and bruises, nicks here, there, here, and there. And that's the difference. So at least one is more, hey, we know it's this. We can control that. We can make this better. Whereas the other is like, all right, it might be a shoulder. It could be a knee. Might be an ankle. Might be this week.
But you're hoping if he's good, there's never the thought of if we run him this many times, it's going to wear down gradually.
But see, I think that is the thought process. Obviously from Coach Tomlin and Colbert, that's why they were talking about minimizing his amount of touches because they felt that the more touches he's getting, the more he wears down.
I feel like in a single game, though, it's the opposite, correct?
But we've only seen him do it early in the season. We've never seen him have that type of, give him a ton of touches late in the season.
I'm talking about in the course of the game. The more carries he gets, the better he gets in the course of the game. So
as long as it's early in the season, though.
That's hard to cut him off in the middle of a game like that if he's cooking. Yeah. And here's another thing to consider. Trust with Ben, right? I mean, look at what we're going through this offseason and the times we're in. I don't think these running backs are going to get a leg up. I mean, right now, as it is, Connor's the better back. But now Connor with a year with Ben and then that trust factor compared to the other running backs we have,
absolutely.
That's another complete leg up. So I think at the end of the day, we could talk about, you mentioned this right at the beginning, we could talk about, bringing in this guy to have this percentage of carries and do a whole running back by committee approach. But at the end of the day, if Ben doesn't trust you and our offense isn't looking how it should be, Connor's going to be the guy.
Yeah. Well, of course, in that theory, in that perfect world. But if you go that route, in week 7, he starts to fall apart. Now you've essentially hurt your team throughout the rest of the season going forward because of that mindset of, hey, this guy trusts him, put him out here the whole time.
It's just hard for me to exactly pinpoint that, all right, if he gets this many carries or if we run him this much, this is going to be an injury where it could happen on any play.
But this is the thought process with it, right? It's kind of like, let's see, how could we equate this? Driving. Okay. We know, could you get in a car accident while driving your car? Sure. Do your chances of getting a car crash go up if you're going over 100 miles an hour versus if you're driving 50 miles an hour? Yes, they do. So same concept. And even though we can't pinpoint what can cause the accident, right? You could say, well, what if you get a flat tire at 50 miles? You could still crash. Or what if it's rain out there? You can still crash. All these things, all these other factors. But we all can agree that, hey, the faster you go, the higher your chances of crashing will be. So with this James Conner situation, even though we can't pinpoint, hey, if he has 20 touches, he's going to get hurt, or if he has 30 touches, he's going to get hurt. We don't know, but we do know from the statistics of his career thus far, the more touches he's getting, the higher the percentages are that he will fall apart. And we've seen that on numerous occasions, which is why the stats say what they say in terms of his percentages of being out there. And the coaching staff and GM even think that because they've seen it. And and it's different too when we're talking about just him being available to go, because we saw the Cleveland Browns game Thursday night, right? Technically, yes, he was healthy to go, but we all could agree, and anybody that was in that stadium could see he was not healthy, and he ended up playing like, I think it was a quarter, maybe 2 quarters tops.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that were transpiring from that, just because of that whole, man, just keep getting him out there, keep getting him out there. It's not just one thing. It's not just that. And I think that's why this debate is even happening right now.
Yeah. So at that point, though, we knew he was unhealthy to a degree.
Well, I mean, he said he was healthy though.
Right. And this comes to the whole player.
Trust him. They trusted him.
This comes to the whole player and team dynamic. But in a perfect world, if he's unhealthy, he's just sitting out. That's all. That's all you would want.
Element, if Ben is saying, hey, this is my guy, I trust him, you think he's going to tell Ben, yo, my shoulder hurt, I can't go? No.
I think
he won't.
I think the Browns game is different if Ben's in as well. I mean, I think Connor would be more willing. It's tough. It's completely. It's tough to say. It's tough to say. Willing to stay out there for if Ben's telling him, "Hey man, you're still helping us." You know what I mean? Even though you're not going as you think you are.
And then the next week when his shoulder is hanging off,
listen, dude,
what are we doing here, man?
I'm just saying he might be more willing because our team was looking better. Would be looking better at that point. Oh, man. That's all. But that's kind of the issue right there, because from a complete perfect world, you're just running James Conner as much as you can, and then when he's hurt, you sit out, because I do think with Ben at quarterback, a combination of Snell and McFarland could still be as effective. I just don't think it's optimal compared to just Conner. Now, if you're looking at split, here's the problem though with splitting the carries. If we're looking aside from health, you could probably agree with this though, just as in a vacuum. Whenever you have Conner out there, and if you try to get another guy out there, I think you will be taken away just from the offensive effectiveness.
Explain.
Okay, so Conner, we have him head and shoulders above all the other running backs right now. Ben trusts him. He's always been a good blocker too.
Correct.
So if you have one of the other running backs out there, you could be hurting potential disguises we could be giving of just masking, are we running or throwing because if like McFarland's out there, maybe it's like we're going to be doing like some type of option play, some type of pass out to the running back, where when Snell's out there, we're running it up the middle, we're going to do a little ground and pound. And then if you even wanted to do like a not a split backfield, but having both backs out there. Yeah. So you're telling me having Snell out there would be a better option in maybe the receiving game or just as an asset alone than Claypool or James Washington or Vance McDonald or Eric Ebron? I don't know if we could say that.
I think when we're just sitting here on paper and we're like, oh yeah, of course you'd rather throw it to a receiver over a running back, but we also saw how Le'Veon Bell changed that whole narrative, and how even James Conner, who we all can agree isn't the same. Wait a minute.
I think
James Conner isn't the same receiving threat as a Le'Veon Bell. And prior to that first season of James being the starter, nobody thought James could catch the ball and do all those type of things. Nobody did. So I think it's unfair for us to say that Benny Snell or Anthony McFarland can't still be successful in that role.
They can be. We don't know, though.
We haven't seen yet. So for me, I don't want to just pass judgment on them in that regard. But I still think, I mean, as much as I would love for James to be the bell cow and get 30 touches a game, if I'm looking big picture, I would much rather have him take less snaps during the regular season so he can be the bell cow back come playoffs when you actually need that, versus you're trying to just use him up. Hey, man, be the bell cow during the regular season. And I've seen this with Le'Veon Bell. We've talked about with Todd Gurley. We can go down the list of running backs who've dominated during the regular season, and then as the playoff race starts, they're banged up, they're beat up getting into it, and they're limping into it, and they're not the same player. They're not as effective, and it ultimately costs you. Whereas you look at the teams that have been winning Super Bowls of lately, they don't have a feature back. They have a whole bunch of, man, this guy does that. He does that. And I look at it more so now is less about the personnel telling you, and it's more so what can your coordinator do to compensate for that? What can your coordinator do to mask certain things? Hey, if Benny Snow's always out there and you're always thinking interior runs, all right, Benny, I'm going to need you to do this time. I'm going to need you to step up a little bit in that. And some of the things
that's kind of the unknown though.
Yeah, very true.
Are you feeling
very
good
true.
about that? I don't know. With Vance or James Washington, Claypool right now, because we haven't seen it from Snow or McFarland yet. I would probably rather have them out there as an asset as opposed to Snow being another guy opposite of Connor. But that's just me though. I mean, there could be a lot of developments.